Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. Spurs secure an important one-goal victory against Manchester City in their first leg Champions League quarterfinal tie. How did Spurs do it? Where did Manchester City go wrong? Don't worry, here at the interviews, we've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, we're going to briefly break down how Spurs beat Manchester City. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/footy analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In today's video, we're going to break down the first half, see how Guardiola looked to approach the game and how Spurs were able to contain them, and then move to the second half, see what changes were made and how Spurs were able to kill it off. But first, let's get to the starting lineups. We look at Spurs, more of a 4-2-3-1. Kane ahead of Dele Alli, out in the wider areas, Son and Eriksen, and in midfield, Sissoko and Harry Winks. Then we look to City, also more of a 4-2-3-1 with Aguero just ahead of David Silva out in the wider areas. They went with Riyad Mahrez and Raheem Sterling, and in midfield they sat with two holders in Gundogan and Fernandinho. So now let's get to the first half, see how Guardiola looked to approach the game and how Spurs were able to contain them in the opening period. So when we break down Spurs against Manchester City, first we have to talk about Guardiola's team selection. We break it down. They are in more of a 4-2-3-1. They did go at Riyad Mahrez down on the right-hand side, looking to try and get the better of Danny Rose. Down the left, they had Sterling, both of them looking to hold their wider positions. Silva looking to get the ball between the lines, but the most important thing here was that De Bruyne was on the bench. Bernardo Silva not available. They went with Gundogan and Fernandinho in the center of the pitch. A bit more conservative, but when we look at Guardiola's track record in this competition in particular, City, Bayern have conceded a lot of goals in these away legs. Perhaps Guardiola wanted to avoid that here, and looking at it, if he could get a result, if he can ensure that he contains Spurs, he would fancy his side to get a goal, or perhaps go into the second leg knowing that all they have to do is win, which isn't much of a big ask. When you look at it here, that is what they did. They didn't really look to close down from the front. They had Aguero stepping to the center backs, and what would happen was that Winks would look to drop in. So instead of Silva always sitting on him, if Silva did look to press one of the center backs, he would ensure that he's positioned in a manner that he does block off passes to Harry Winks, and that would force Winks to vary his movement there. But besides, and sometimes you'd have Fernandinho stepping, but for the most part, that is how they went with it. They sat in two banks of four. They had the wider players looking to push out, and Sterling and Mahrez did a very good job of sitting on Trippier and sitting on Rose. And the one big issue that City really did have without the ball was the fact that they had to worry about Dele Alli's movement, and he did get the ball in some good positions, and we'll get to him in a bit. But that is how City went about things, more of a 4-4-2, two banks of four, and then they had Silva stepping with Aguero to try and close down there to ensure that Spurs couldn't build out of the back, and to try and ensure that Winks couldn't get time on the ball to spray passes and dictate the tempo of the game. But this was more about how Spurs were going to go about it. They did have a week's rest in comparison to City, who did play on the weekend. You expected them in their new stadium to press from the front, to try and close down, and that's what they kind of did. What you do see from the offsets that Harry Kane obviously stepping to the center backs, looking to close them down. And what we often saw was Dele Alli sitting on Fernandinho, trying to ensure that he couldn't get on the ball, and the wider players were also disciplined. Initially, we had Eriksen stepping out. You had Son stepping out to the fullbacks to ensure that they did have that space clogged down. But what we often saw was that sometimes Alli would step and press the center backs as well. And when he stepped with Kane and pressed the center backs, you would think, okay, now they have a big issue here because it is 3v2 in midfield. But what Spurs often did was that when Kane and Alli did look to press Laporte and Otamendi, they were boxed in and they looked to block off passes into the central midfielders, and that would see Winks and that would see Sissoko step forward as well. So when you have those two stepping forward into those positions there, you have a box so that you don't have Fernandinho and you don't have Gundogan getting onto the ball, and then it leaves Silva drifting out into areas where how does he get onto it? There was one specific situation where we did see David Silva drop off a bit deeper, and that forced Eriksen to tuck in when he moved off to the left-hand side, and he stepped to Fernandinho, and then that allowed Winks to deal with Silva's threat as Sissoko stepped to Gundogan. But initially, you had Eriksen on the right, you had Eriksen on the right, and then you had Son on the left. They eventually swapped flanks, which did make sense because you could have Eriksen drift centrally to pull Kyle Walker out of position, and then have Danny Rose dart into that space there. And then Son against Delph just made sense because now you have a direct threat against Fabian Delph, who isn't a natural left back. He could run at him, cause him problems. And what we often saw with Spurs was that they were looking to play diagonals in behind Delph, who often did get caught narrow, for Son and for Dele Alli to break into that space to stop that. But back to Spurs' pressing. Like I said, pressing from the front in that regard. And what we ended up seeing was that if Delph looked to drift over, initially we saw Eriksen track him into that space. One time we saw Gundogan drop into that space when Eriksen was pulled out, but Sissoko was stepping into that space as well. Ideally, what they did want here was that you have Dele Alli sitting on Fernandinho, you have Gundogan sitting against Sissoko. Sissoko, more of an athlete, physical specimen that could really stop Gundogan, who is a bit more slower than your average midfielder. And then you have David Silva, who is looking to drift laterally, with Winks looking to track him. But in terms of Manchester City, they didn't really create many chances here, and that was down to the way that Spurs were going about it and their conservative approach. You look to only 2 opportunities in particular. The way that they did win the penalty when the ball was shifted out to Raheem Sterling, who for one of the few times he was able to beat Trippier, cut in on Alderweireld, and have a shot fizzed in towards Danny Rose, who blocked it, but it was awarded a penalty due to VAR. And then shortly after that, we again do see Gundogan dropping off a bit deeper ahead of Dele Alli to get on the ball, and he was able to split Son, and he was able to split Sissoko to find David Silva drifting into space behind Sissoko to get on the ball and slide the ball out wide to Sterling. But again, nothing really stemmed from there. So besides Sergio Aguero's penalty miss and flashing 2 efforts wide when he was able to get half chances around the box, this was more about Spurs. So when we look to Dele Alli, he was the key player in the opening half for Spurs. Harry Kane did do a very good job battling against Otamendi, against Laporte. They never really were able to stop him in terms of backing into goal, winning challenges in the air. He was putting his body on the line, but it was Dele Alli who was able to find spaces in behind and in between Gundogan and Fernandinho, and they didn't really look like they knew how to pick him up, with City dropping off a bit deeper opposed to pressing high from the front and trying to close down those spaces. We looked to one of the first opportunities, Danny Rose from left back, clipping the ball in between the lines for Dele Alli, in behind Fernandinho and in behind Gundogan, and he notices Sissoko initially running off Fernandinho and slides the ball into him down that left channel. And as he breaks down that left channel, he instantly pulls the ball back for Ali, breaking towards the box, but he just volleyed his effort inches wider than that. One of the few opportunities that we do see those two combined. Shortly after that, you have Eriksen in that left-sided role after he switched positions with Son, playing the ball into Ali, who backs into Otamendi, is able to turn him on the spin, break down the line with Otamendi tracking well, but then using a piece of skill to again get around him, but the ball was poked into the path of Eriksen, and although there was a foul call on the play, the referee did let it play on and he pulled it back to Harry Kane, but Ederson made a great save to deny him that opportunity there. Shortly after that, we see Winks pick up the ball from a deeper position. No one closes him down. Silva gets there a bit late, and he's able to instantly play the ball in between Gundogan and Fernandinho once again, and this time it's Ali dropping off to pull out Laporte, and he dummies the ball into Kane, who is now pulled down by Otamendi, who backed into him. That's again great combination play between the two attackers. Ali again finding space between the lines, and the center backs not being able to deal with either of those two players, and that was pivotal. Although they're not really creating enough chances that you would expect them to, City did do a good job in that regard, but they did have issues dealing with Ali's movement and Kane jostling with the two center backs. And the final opportunity, it does stem from Spurs playing out of the back, and finally City looking to press. Alderweireld slides the ball out to Trippier, and we do see Sterling finally step to him. But when he plays the ball into him, Sissoko drops off. And when Sissoko drops off, Gundogan should be there, but he takes a bit of time to step forward. The pressing was disjointed, and by the time he gets there, Sissoko is able to skip past him, and he locates Fernandinho kind of stepping, but Ali does pick up a position to his right to get the pass there. And when he gets that pass there, he's able to slide the ball into Danny Rose because Eriksen pulls Walker narrow and Mahrez isn't tracking. But we do have to give Mahrez credit here for making his run back, tracking that run, and he was able to block the cross. But in that play alone, you see City not pressing. Then when they decide to, it's disjointed. You see Ali picking out that space there, Sissoko driving forward, Eriksen's movement. That is what Pochettino wanted. Although City's approach did make sense, it did limit their attacking options in the opening period because they would have to buy time for Spurs to tire so that they can really get on the ball. And the other factor here was that although they did limit Spurs from forcing Ederson into various saves, Ali was able to pick out good positions, and they would have to try and find an answer for that in the second half. So now let's get to the second half, see if either side made any key changes and how Spurs were able to kill off the game. So when we break down the second half between Spurs and Manchester City, there were no real changes in the opening period, but we did see more of an attacking threat instantly from Manchester City. You had the ball switched out to Walker, who was instantly pressed by Christian Eriksen, and then instantly from that, you had Rose stepping into Mahrez, and when the ball was played into Mahrez, he instantly dropped it off to Fernandinho. He was pressed by Winks, and he slid the ball to David Silva, who was able to wrap the ball across Winks and across Sissoko for Gundogan breaking in behind. And when Gundogan broke in behind them, he was able to slide the ball out to Sergio Aguero peeling off to the right. And now you have somewhat of a 3v2 with Vertonghen caught. You have Alderweireld shifting over, and there you have Trippier shifting over as well. And Aguero is able to pick out Raheem Sterling, who brings down the ball with Trippier coming to him, but he can only force Lloris into a save. That was one of City's bigger chances in the half, but this half was largely dominated by Heung Min Son. And although it wasn't more of a systematic thing, what we did see was now he was able to get that 1v1 battle with Fabian Delph, and not in terms of running at him, but more so exposing his lack of positioning in that left back role. But we look to one of the first opportunities prior to that. It just stems from Trippier and Sterling going 50-50, and he was able to pick up the ball from deep with Gundogan shifting over, cutting in on him and firing a low shot inches wide of the net from 30 yards out. After that, we saw more of what Son could offer. What you see here is Sissoko breaking forward and Gundogan doing a good job of tracking him to win the ball back. But as he pushed forward, Harry Kane stepped in. And when Kane steps into that challenge, now you have Gundogan pulled out of position, and you have Fernandinho just representing protecting the back four. And you have Vinks push forward, Fernandinho stepping to him now, and although he did get by him, he was pulled down, and you see Harry Kane picking up the ball, and now you have Son, who makes the darting run in behind Laporte to drag out Otamendi, and he dragged his shot on goal. That's another opportunity that we do see. But as the half wore on, we saw Spurs' pressing kind of drop off. They were more of now two banks of four without the ball, like I said, not pressing from the front, but City weren't making the most of their opportunities as well. Sterling wasn't getting the better of Trippier down the left. They had a lot of opportunities down the right-hand side where Mahrez was against Rose, but you had Eriksen dropping off to ensure that it was 1v2, and Walker was holding his positioning as well because of the threat that perhaps Ali and Kane or perhaps even Son could offer down that side. So Mahrez did whip in a lot of crosses into the box, but they weren't meeting Aguero or meeting Sterling, and Vertonghen and Alderweireld did well there. Eventually, Harry Kane did have to leave the game, and we saw Lucas Moura come on. He didn't offer much of a threat going up front, but he did force a booking, which I guess does matter to an extent. We saw Gabriel Jesus come on for Aguero, and that didn't really change things. The key move here was when Spurs pushed Eriksen central, they moved Lucas Moura and they had Son wide, and Ali was pushing forward here, and that just freed up more space for Eriksen to get on the ball, which makes sense based off the fact that Ali was finding space in the first half. So now you can get Eriksen involved, and he did play the pivotal role in the goal, because when we break down that goal, it's Ali dropping off the ball to him, and you have Fernandinho, you have Gundogan, and you even have Mahrez tucked in. City were very narrow in that regard. So when you have City narrow in that positioning right there, you have them, the midfield two with Mahrez tucking in, you have the center backs narrow, and you have Delph tucked in narrow as well, which there's no reason for him to be that narrow because there's only Ali up against the two center backs. But with him caught narrow, now that creates space for Son to make that darting run in behind, and Eriksen picks it out well. And although Son nearly makes a meal out of it, he's able to keep it in and then still able to cut it on Delph, who thought the ball was out, to fire a low shot at Ederson that he couldn't stop, and just like that, they take the lead. You eventually see Wanyama come on for wings for more protection, Llorente coming on for Dele Alli, who couldn't continue, and just like that, we see another opportunity. Same thing, from a throw-in, you have Llorente backing into Otamendi and playing the ball across Fernandinho for Eriksen, who once again locates that run of Son, making it across of Delph, and when he makes that run across him, because he's caught narrow, he only fires a shot over the net. But again, that's another opportunity there. Eventually, Guardiola brought on De Bruyne, brought on Sané a bit too late, and we saw one more opportunity where we did see Son get in behind Delph. That was narrow, but he only could fire a tame cross at Ederson. When you break down the game as a whole and you look at it, City penalty shot missed, and apart from that, just one mental lapse where Son was able to get in behind, and this game was decided by fine margins. Guardiola will get a lot of stick for perhaps not introducing De Bruyne or Sané later on, but this was a game that perhaps he wanted to keep tight, and he did do that to a large degree. There were some areas like I said, with Son, where perhaps with Ali in the first half that he could have shut down, but the result isn't too bad, and for Spurs, this was the result they needed, and perhaps given the fact that City were so conservative and that they had the edge on them with their pressing in the first half, they probably feel like they should have scored more goals. But let me know what you guys think. Does this mark the end of City? Can they come back in the second leg? And what about Spurs? If they don't get through City, will this be a failure in the Champions League once again? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget to upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.